Have you ever played one of those games or earned one of those platinum trophies where you had a great time, you really enjoyed it, but then you put down the controller, you have a little bit of look online, social media, the reviews, and I have to say, it's pretty whack. And yeah, apparently everyone else hates it. I think we're all very different, we all have different tastes, so I thought in this video I would talk about 7 times I've earned a platinum trophy in a game, had a great time, and it turns out that everyone else thinks it's a bit of a stinker. So the first game is Diablo 3. Hardcore Diablo fans will tell you that this is the worst Diablo. I wouldn't know, it is the only one I've actually played. But I had a great time with it. It's the first time I've ever played an isometric RPG co-op like this game before, and I know Diablo's been around for a long ass time. I've always known of it, I just never really took a dive into it, especially since it was a lot bigger on PC until Diablo 3 came out. But I did really enjoy it. I found it really complex and rewarding and fun, especially with friends. Yes, there is a few trophies that are pretty awful. Firstly, for getting to level 99 on hardcore, which is where if you die once, your character is permanently deleted, and it's not necessarily a short experience. It's probably like 12 to 15 hours to beat the story and get level 99 if you have someone who can kind of power level you at the end, but you still got to beat the story. And this means you've kind of got to play the game, and then at the end of every chapter, because the only hard part of the whole game really is the boss, you've got to just make a quick backup save and then you beat the boss. It's not too bad, it's just daunting for the fact that if you do die, you have to either start again or at least go back to your previous backup cloud save. There's a lot of different builds, and particularly just using the necromancer I found to be very helpful, just because of the amount of minions he summons that just distract everybody and keep you alive. There is a trophy for completing 500 of the missions after the game's over, which does mean you kind of have to jump into a world, run around, complete some missions, and then just leave and start again. And this did take about 10-12 hours. I got to build up my class, I got to see what the game was about in that time, and although it was a little bit draining, I was playing with friends, so I did have a great time with it. There was only 3 of us, but we just shoot the shit, we just spoke about life and had a good little giggle while we ran around aimlessly killing everything we saw. I get that it's grinding towards the end and that people who are Diablo fans didn't think it was particularly good compared to previous games, but I do think Diablo 3 is a good jumping in point for people who want to play Diablo 3, especially trophy hunters, because it's not too bad considering the other trophy lists for Diablo 2 and 4, which are quite excessive. This is the fastest platinum trophy you can get at around 70 to 80 hours, and if you have a friend who's already high level, they can just power you through it anyway. Alright, I know this game's bad. This game is bad, but I did enjoy it. And that is the One Punch Man game. One Punch Man, the hero nobody knows. I got this game around about the time I actually got my first ever capture card, and I captured like 3 to 4 hours of gameplay footage of me playing it before scrapping the video entirely. It is really silly. It's a basic anime 3D fighter, you know the type. It's just a cash-in. You go through season 1 of One Punch Man, but you create your own hero, and as you level them up, you can take on any hero you cross his abilities, so you can just make a complete mismatch, other than Saitama of course. And it's just stupid, but it's fun, and the Platinum Trophy isn't hard, but it is a bad game, and because the game's bad, the Platinum Trophy can't be good, right? So the whole experience is pretty mid. If you didn't like One Punch Man, this game is not worth your time, and I kind of get that, because if you're making a game based on a show and half of the core audience still hate it, you're not going to have a massive amount of sales, are you? So people who are picking this up never watch the series, then yeah, I totally get why you would think it stinks, because it does. I don't think the game takes itself too seriously, but I think they probably didn't have a choice, because it's pretty mid. You run around this town, talk to heroes, level up your hero rank till you get like Hero S. It's just easy, it's fun, and if you love the show like I did, you'll still have a really good time. The game's like a 20-hour platinum, so you jump in, you laugh at how bad it is, you make your own character, you have an easy time winning, and then you kind of just have the platinum trophy. So it is a good time. I thought it was a good time anyway, but I totally get why people think it's proper dump. Next is Tekken Tag 2. So I recently earned every platinum trophy you can in every Tekken game, mainline and the Tag series. Now Tekken Tag 1 is excellent, but I didn't realize at the time that Tekken Tag 2 was actually really poorly received. It didn't sell well at all, and that's why Tekken 7 was released on such a low budget, because it went Tekken 6, Tekken Tag 2, which absolutely flopped, and then Tekken 7, which came on a much lower budget but still did really well. The platinum trophy is pretty grindy and difficult. It is really difficult. At this point I'd played Tekken 6 Tag. I'd played Tekken 6, Tekken Tag 2, Tekken Tag 2 Prologue, and Tekken Tag 2. Yeah, So I played 4 Tekken games in about a week and a half, and I was still so bad at them, I have to say. And most of the game is really easy. It's the generic Tekken stuff. There's no story with it being a tag game, so you literally just have offline and online trophies. But one of the trophies is earned through Ghost Mode, and it's called Behold the Tekken Lord, and you have to go into Ghost Mode, and basically in Ghost Mode, you face ghosts of online players, and then you have to beat them to level up. And that sounds really easy, and the guide says a 3 out of 10, whatever. It really isn't, because by the time you're playing it now, like 10 years after the game came out, the only people online are really good at the game, and the tag mechanic in this game is so different to any other Tekken game. It is a completely different game altogether. It is insane the amount of combos and juggles you can actually do in it, and you get slapped across the entire arena by the computer and online. So if you don't play fighter games, you will struggle with this one more than any of the other Tekken games, because the rest of them are all pretty easy. But what I love about this game is that it actually forced me to get good at the game, because I'd played probably about 40 hours of Tekken at this point, and I was so bad at the game, and I really had to actually understand the mechanics of the game and try and get good at it. As much as I loved playing with Miguel, he was my main up until Tekken 7. When I swapped to Tekken 8 and I started using Victor, I realized that Miguel actually is a very difficult character to master. A rookie can't just play him, because he's very much about being incredibly aggressive, and you have to know his move style down to a T. And I struggled a bit with Miguel, but I did love playing him, so if he ever comes on Tekken 8, I will be going back to Tekken 8 to play it. But I really just had to master the game. I had to like understand movement patterns and try my best, and I did it in the end. Of the Tekken games on PlayStation, I would say it probably is the worst in terms of combat. I think Tekken 8 is by far the best, and then 7, then probably Tag, and then Tekken 6, then Tekken Tag 2. If you want a bit of a challenge, you actually want to master a Tekken game, it actually gets you into the game. So if you want to play Tekken 7 or 8, the best thing you can do is pick a character who's in 7 and 8, but also in Tag 2, go back and get the Platinum Trophy in Tekken Tag 2. Despite the fact I spent about 20 hours doing over 300 matches in the offline, all of which were difficult to get the Platinum Trophy, I'm still so glad I did it, and I really had a good time with it. Okay, this one is hated for a few reasons that I totally get, and it's Lord of the Rings War in the North. You have a choice of 3 characters, a human ranger, a elf mage, or a dwarf. A trio, kind of like the main party, and it's set alongside the actual Lord of the Rings trilogy, and you're in the North and you're fighting your own battle here. It's just such a good game. It's an RPG, third person, hack and slash. You can play with up to 3 of your friends as well, and you just complete this really fun, rewarding story alongside the main trilogy, and you level up your character. The combat's great, the RPG mechanics are great. It's a really stellar game, honestly. This is how I would want a Lord of the Rings game to play. Coming in at 7 out of 10 on the guys, you have to beat the game on the hardest difficulty. It is a challenge, but it's really, really buggy, and I am talking next level buggy. For some reason, some of the copies of the game don't work, so one of the people I was playing with, basically whenever we were in his game, whenever we got the end of the first level, the entire game crashed, and none of us could actually continue, so he actually had to drop out about 2 hours into the game with us, so it was me and someone else. And then on top of that, there's some levels like midway through the game where they're just, when you load in, the game utterly crashes. And as well, there's certain things you've got to pick up, certain things you've got to choose, and for some reason some of them don't register. This is what happened to me, and thankfully I made a backup save. But basically, you're on this level, you're defending a city, defending some gate, and essentially I killed everybody and the game wouldn't load, it would not continue. And then when I quit out and loaded back in, the same thing happened. Essentially, your save files get corrupt while you're playing the game. So I played this about 4 or 5 times, and every time I got the same part of the same level, it just crashed and it wouldn't go any further. This was on my hard run as well, so it was actually hard to get that far. It was about halfway through the game, 2/3 of the way through the game, and I was stuck. So if I just deleted my save and did a new game, I wouldn't have been able to carry over any of my abilities, which would have made hard just probably an absolute depression-causing minefield. So what I had to do was, thankfully, I had backed up my save, but I backed it up before the end of the last fight on my first run. So essentially what I had to do was, despite the fact that I'd played about 15 hours, I had to load up that previous save from the PlayStation Cloud, download it. I had to delete loads of files within the game and try and restore the game back to its launch version, and then play through it all again, keep making more and more cloud saves. I had to make some on a memory stick, because you just didn't know during the second playthrough if the save file was just corrupt or not, because you wouldn't know until you got to literally 70% way through the game on hard, which is really difficult to reach. This took me about 80 to 90 hours. It did definitely sour the experience of getting the Platinum Trophy, but it's still such a fantastic game. It's just one of those games that's just so buggy that it sours the experience, and I totally get why people hate it so much. Next is another game that is completely riddled by glitches, which is Chivalry 2. Now, I loved this game. I did a full video on it about 18 months to 2 years ago almost at this point. It is just a first person or third person PvP medieval fighter game, and it is just absolutely hilarious. It is such a good game, even by yourself. Most games that I talk about that are multiplayer, I always say they're better with friends. Of course this is better, but this game is so fun by yourself that you can easily just play it and have a blast with it by yourself. The only problem is, again, firstly there's a lot of grindy trophies which involve winning 20 times on every single map, and there's a lot of them. But secondly, so many of the trophies are bugged. I had a problem where I had to win 5 times on one map and win 20 times, 2 separate trophies. Well, my 5 times didn't pop. I got a trophy for winning on the Coxwells 20 times. I still remember the name of the trophy, but not the 5 wins or 10 wins, whatever it was. And I remember I was so annoyed. I actually emailed the developers and tweeted them. I was like, please help, and they just never ever replied. So that was great of them. I think this game really does divide people. If you look at the reviews and stuff, like some people think it's really good, some people just can't see past its issues, and if you can look past all of its flaws, it's such a unique game. It is absolutely incredible to play, and there's no other game like it other than LotR, which is by far the inferior version of this game. It was the same developers who did Chivalry 1, then they split, and one did Chivalry 2, half of them did Chivalry 2, half of them did LotR. The people who did LotR, it is by far inferior in almost every single way, unfortunately. Chivalry 2 is one of those games where you should definitely play, but bear in mind that the trophies are really, really, really buggy. If you don't mind that, you can still go for it. I still got the platinum. I think everyone I played with still got the platinum trophy, but it did involve a lot of replaying certain sections and things like that. And it is a 50-hour platinum, which is made longer by issues you're probably going to have. I would say, bear in mind, there will be a glitch in your save. You know, I haven't spoke about this game in about 18 minutes, and I feel like I need to talk about it again. Actually, I haven't spoken about this game in a couple of months, but it's always on my mind. I just can't get away from Outriders. What a game. This game was absolutely review bombed unnecessarily by all the critics, by a lot of people, and they just didn't get it. That is ultimately what it is. It's a fantastic third-person cooperative PvE looter shooter. When I played Outriders, I didn't really know much about the looter shooter genre. I really didn't. I think I'd only played Diablo, and it's not really a looter shooter, it's a hack and slash RPG, but essentially it's the same in terms of the loot. And I just fell in love with it, and now I've played so many more looter shooters, I can honestly say Outriders has one of, if not the best, looter shooter leveling up system. It is fantastic. The amount of variety you can add to your builds is insane. This platinum trophy, it's not difficult, but there is a lot of grind towards the end. You've got to do a lot of the expeditions, which is like killing 1,000 enemies with so many different weapons. There is collectibles, which some of them are RNG. The platinum trophy on paper is pretty mid, but the game is sensational. It really is. It's like maybe it's not sensational. I'd probably give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. These type of games always fall flat when their best aspects are the end game, which is literally 20 hours into the game, and then probably 10 hours in the end game. They need to shorten the stories, make them 3 to 5 hours, get the end game mechanics in immediately, and then bring the story back. These type of games like Outriders, they still suffer from not having enough skills for real long-term play, but there is enough here to have at least 60 hours of fun. If you go in this game and just think, it's a weak story and the story's just getting me into the game, I'm going to just work on the mechanics, try and build up my character best I can until I get in the end game, and then you're going to have one hell of a time and just becoming like basically this walking god killer. I want to add one controversial game into this list. And then I wrote this game down, and then I looked at it and I was like, okay. And I've sat down to try and talk about it, and I'm a bit like, did I enjoy it? Did I actually enjoy it? Okay, the final game is actually Suicide Squad. I know. The game is, it leaves room to be desired, shall I say. But what I will say on this game is, I had a difficult experience with it, don't get me wrong. I had crashed servers, which meant that even though I paid an extra £30 for early access, I didn't get early access for about 10 hours. But I do enjoy the story, and the combat is decent, and I think, again, it has to be played in cooperative to have a good time with this. If you play this game in single player, sweat through the first 10-hour campaign really quickly, and then we're just left with the end game grind, I don't blame people hating it. I'm not going to say this game's great at all, but there was definitely times when I had fun with it. I played with ZXL and we just pissed about. We had a great time. And the first 2/3 of the story are actually really compelling. They're really fun. And then you don't realise that a lot of the mechanics and missions that you do are just end game missions later on. There's definitely a serious issue with the loot and the end game. And the end of the game, don't get me wrong, the grind is pretty grim. You've got to do hundreds and hundreds of endgame missions to level up one of the infamy sets. It is pretty horrendous. However, once again, if you do it with friends, you get through it so much faster. When you get like level 8 or 9, it starts to become difficult by yourself. I did manage to get like 25 done solo, but they were so difficult and I was failing them. But a group of 3 or 4, you do manage to just absolutely wipe through most of them. Sometimes it gets difficult, but it can be done, and I was a person who actually got to level 20 on the end game, so everyone else could join my game and get all the end game stuff. So I played this game for about 70 hours over 2 weeks, and my first 35 hours were honestly pretty positive. I actually made a tweet saying it's not that bad. People be crying about it's not like an Arkham game. That's definitely a weird choice for Rocksteady to make, and they clearly were heavily influenced by the publishers as to what game they could make. But it's decent enough. It's definitely a £20 game, and there's issues with it, don't get me wrong. Like, if you actually break it down, I think it's the type of game where you can play with friends, have a good time for 20-30 hours, and then kind of look at it afterwards and go, what did we just play? But as long as you have a good time, that's all that matters, right? Because I did honestly have some really good times with this, especially in the early stages. By far, Deadshot and Captain Boomerang are the best characters by a landslide. I don't think looter shooters are that popular, and I don't know why developers seem to keep thinking that they can make games that are like Destiny, but a free-to-play model, and charge someone £70 because they've slapped on a 10-hour story at the beginning. Because that's essentially what Suicide Squad is. If it came out as free-to-play without the story, it would have absolutely tanked. Don't get me wrong, awful. So when you beat the game, there's only like 4 endgame missions you can do. The game should have finished with at least 12, and there should have been, realistically, probably 4 main characters for the story, and then as soon as you beat the game, they should have brought in another 2. By the time Joker came out a month later, nobody gave a shit, because I definitely didn't. So yeah, I think we've all got those games that we actually do secretly love, even though we don't want to admit it. And we had a great time earning the Platinum Trophies. So let me know in the comments down below what game you love, or what Platinum Trophy you love, that everyone else seems to totally hate.